there's benefits to being old.
Oh, I'm starting to get that wisdom shit. It's great.
I don't have wisdom so much. I do have back pain. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, same. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's basically the same.
Yeah, I'm definitely at a point in my life where I don't feel that I have wisdom, but I do have sore knees all the time. So
At one point, I thought that I would be able to run the city to surf, and I did. And then I finished it. My knees did not. So ever since then, it's now I've got nana knees.
oh gosh.
I mean, it's a cool reason. It's not a cool reason. It's a dumb reason. You don't run. Running's dumb. But
Yeah.
yeah,
You don't
regret.
need to run unless you're being chased by a bear.
And I wouldn't, because what right do deadly things have to have bums and ears like that? That's like it's like an anglerfish, but in ear and bum form.
yeah. Their ultimate lure is how cute and fuzzy they are. That's how
Oh,
people die from bear attacks. They just get too close to them and they're like, I want to
totally.
pat
And
you. Jo Thornely, welcome to Re-AniMates.
g'day. Thank you for having me, but I'm not going to thank you for making me watch what you made me watch.
The movie, in case it's not clear, that we're talking about today is Satanic from, from 2006. A very uninventive name, but I guess accurate for what it is.
I guess. Oh,
Mm.
there are. I mean, there's arguments online that it's actually witchcraft, you guys. But
So obviously, when I wanted you onto this podcast, I chose Satanic because I know that you know a lot about cults, and cults are often satanic.
I will take any link, however tenuous. I also know a lot about bad movies. I don't know a lot about boobs though, but that was the only area of this movie that my expertise was irrelevant for. If anything, it just smacked a little bit of the 80s satanic panic, which, and those 80s cults don't really behave, the 80s imagined cults don't really behave in the way that real cults do. But a lot of the occult tropes were there, which was kind of fun. The whole thing had an 80s vibe to it.
Yeah, so Satanic, 2006, directed by Dan Golden, who's, when I looked him up, he's more often than not a producer. And some of his other producer titles include Bikini Frankenstein, um, Girl with the Sex Ray Eyes, and The Bear Wench Project 3, Nymphs of Mystery Mountain. Well, I don't.
Yeah, so for anyone listening that isn't already aware of Golden's back catalogue.
Well, I don't mean to make fun. I mean, there's nothing wrong with like schlock B movies, movies that are way too horny for their own good, and there's also nothing wrong with titties in principle either. It just seems that his quote unquote serious film fare is a bit few and far between.
Yep.
And, spoiler alert, there's definitely gratuitous titties in Satanic 2006. So it was also written by Ben Powell in his screenwriting debut, which is also not super surprising.
Look, there's a couple of tiny highlights. There's
Mm.
some of the dialogue is fine, which is high praise.
There's a couple of lines where I went, that stands out, but only because everything around it was so
Yep.
bad. The way that I would describe 99% of the scenes in this film is meandering. They go on for too long. One of the good things, though, was that a lot of the special effects work and the makeup and stuff was done by Jeffrey S. Farley, who worked on the 1988 remake of The Blob, which, if you haven't seen, is fucking so good. Like, you don't expect that a remake of a silly movie like The Blob is actually going to be really good, but it is fantastic. I highly recommend it. And a lot of episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the original Pet Sematary. So let's dive in headfirst to this thing, because the sooner we start talking about it, the sooner we won't have to talk about it anymore. We open on a woman crawling from a car wreck. She's trying to save the other man in the car, but it explodes. This woman is, well, we later find out to be Michelle, played by Annie Sorrell.
We find out pretty quickly because I noticed that her name is mentioned about 18 times in the first 5 minutes.
There's a lot of people calling each other by their names more than you ever would in real life in this movie, which I think is often a sign of a not great script.
That's right, Lisa.
Yeah. You're right, Joe. That's a good point. Because it's like, when you really think about it, when you're talking to someone, how often do you ever say their first name?
Well, especially when you're talking to someone in a hospital bed, with no one else in the room, you don't really need to. It's not okay. And this question's directed to Michelle.
Unfortunately, Jeffrey Combs is first in the credits, even before the lead actors, which turns out to be a mean. Yeah, it turns out to be a mean prank on the part of the filmmakers, because again, spoiler alert, he is barely in this thing, and it's really frustrating when filmmakers put someone very high up in the credits, even though what they're doing is basically a cameo, and a cameo is fine, but call it that.
Starring a brief cameo by Jeff. For a 2006 movie of this quality, the credits were very good high production credits for a 1990s movie.
In hospital, Michelle's face is covered in bandages. The man in the car was apparently her father. Michelle's doctor is played by, in another fun little mini role, by Angus Scrimm, who is the tall man from the Phantasm movie. If you've seen those, he's great in those. He's fine in this.
A lot of the reviews I read, both overjoyed to see Combs and Scrimm in it, but furious that they didn't have bigger parts. He plays a very comforting doctor, except every now and then I can't remember exactly what he was talking about, but he's talking about something medical. It's like, oh, that's a very common phenomenon. And in the Dark Ages, it was something like, people used to think that was a sign of being a witch. And it's like, can we just make sure our bedside manner is a little bit less mystical?
Yeah, well, in that scene, he says that because of the extent of her injuries, they had to drill a hole into her head to relieve the pressure on the brain, which used to be called trepanning back in the day. I don't know if they still do it. I'm not a doctor. I imagine that medical science has found a better way. But he says that they used to do it in the Dark Ages to release the demons. And Michelle says, "Did you get them?" Which is kind of funny. Yeah.
I like that she also assures the doctor when he's talking about how he had to reconstruct her face, or that he was about to start reconstructing her face. She said, "I was beautiful." No pressure, mate.
Her memory's a bit wiped. The doctor, when he does take off her bandages, he says that, she's healed wonderfully. And damn it, she has, because there's not a fucking mark on her. Like,
how he managed to get lip gloss on her through that tiny little bandage slit.
Yeah.
He truly is a medical artist.
It's very thoughtful of him to put on a full face of makeup before he put the bandages back on after her surgery, so that they would, so that she could look good when it comes off. Yeah.
So rare for me to look at someone who's just come out of a car accident and many, many bandages and think, what conditioner does she use?
Yeah, barely a scratch. She doesn't recognize her own face, though. Her memory's still messed up. She keeps having these flashbacks, and the doctor brings her personal effects from the accident that the cops brought her. And the only item is this very satanic-looking Ouija board type thing.
It's satanic depending on how you feel about papyrus font.
It is the devil's font, I'll say it. She does have this memory that she made it herself. So we get our first murder not long after, even though we have to assume that he has been murdered because we don't see anything. We have a scene where Cliff, the janitor, he hits on a nurse, presumably so that you don't feel as bad when he is mysteriously murdered like 5 seconds later.
He also tells a terrible story about one of the incongruous conversations. And incongruous conversation number 1, the janitor at lunch with an orderly. The orderly tells the story of, which is fantastic writing because it comes up later, how he saw a guy come in with a stripper heel in his eye that went right through to his brain. I think Cliff the janitor is a bit dismissive of that story and then tries to crack onto a nurse. So there's a couple of times where you go, he's going to die.
Yeah, and again, like, even though that story comes up later, neither of those scenes is integral to the film. Neither of them matter in the slightest to the film. And yet you have a 5-minute scene of a janitor who dies 5 minutes later and an orderly you don't see again, having a long-ass lunch conversation that has nothing to do with anything in the film. It's so weird. Were you just like...
It's fantastic.
Were the filmmakers just like getting bored and they were like, oh, we can't have a 70-minute movie. We have to have more stuff happening. Quick, film those two. We have to give our
characters depth. We have to give our sleazy janitor a bit of meat.
We soon meet my friend and yours, Jeffrey Combs, in his first scene. He plays Detective Joyner, who's looking into Cliff's death. He's interviewing Michelle but leaves pretty quickly, and I was very worried that this was going to be his only scene and I'd have to watch the entire rest of the movie. He does come back later, but again, it is a fleeting scene, and I was so annoyed that they had Jeffrey Combs, this iconic horror actor, and they gave him nothing to do. Like, he's doing the best he can with this script, but they just gave him nothing.
It may have been a problem with acting skill contrast.
Yeah, especially because in general, the other actors are quite low energy. I don't know if that's a skill thing or if that's just how they decide to play it. But I think that Jeffrey Combs, if he was going to play it bigger, might have played it a bit more high energy, and it might have looked a bit too drastic. I don't know.
His jacket was bigger. It was a couple of sizes too long.
Yeah.
I will always be able to pick a big jacket in a terrible movie.
One of your skills.
Yeah, The Room. Every jacket is too big in The Room.
And that's definitely the main problem with The Room too.
Yep.
That's the only bad thing about that film.
Absolutely.
We also soon meet nasty Mr. Bisson, played by Rick Dean. He runs a place called Harmony House, which is like a home for troubled young people. Him and his wife take in these young people, ostensibly to care for them. Spoiler alert, does not the fuck work out that way.
Ineffective.
I was distracted. I don't know if it's meant to be part of this character, but I was distracted by how filthy Bisson's front window is in his car when he's driving Michelle back to her house to get some stuff.
You were distracted by that? Weren't you engaged with incongruous conversation too?
I can do two things. I'm a woman. I'm good at multitasking.
Oh,
I can be disgusted by a filthy windshield and horrified at a bad script.
Don't you hate it when you're being driven home from hospital to your new foster house and your new dad is telling a story about a stripper who murdered someone, thereby closing down the strip joint when he still had a 2-for-1 discount voucher?
He also knows a huge amount about Michelle and her parents. So there's a scene where they're sitting in the car and he's just unloading her entire history onto her because she obviously doesn't remember anything. But it's an obscene amount of knowledge. Like, not even the doctors would have known this much about her.
No, he knows her entire backstory, except whether or not she's been to that strip club. It seems to be the only piece of information he doesn't know.
Yeah, he seems to have this entire script about how Michelle didn't appreciate her dad dating again after her mother died, that she attacked her dad's girlfriend, that she started rebelling and hanging out with the wrong crowd. Like, he's got all of this very personal information. So there's also a fun line where Bisso says this when he's looking up at the house.
That is one big-ass house.
Is it meant to be part of his character that he thinks it's a big, nice house? Because he has a big house.
Another delightful, secure moment of familial health when he's about to take in this ward of the state and goes through an underwear drawer, holds up a camisole and goes, "This is nice. Get out of my drawer."
Yeah, she doesn't really seem to care that he's rifling through her underwear drawer. He steals some weed that she left in there. He just pockets it. Fine. Very creepy. He becomes more and more grotesque throughout the film. He also finds a book with a pentagram on it, which turns out to be Michelle's journal, I think. Just more evidence of her being a wrong-un.
I'll just say as well that the pentagrams in the movie are upside down.
Well, yeah, because they're just stars with the single tip at the top. A pentagram is that is the one thing about a pentagram, is that it's an upside down star.
I didn't go to high school in the 80s just to have pentagrams misrepresented in horror movies.
I mean, that's like the one thing people would know about occult, witchcraft sort of imagery. Like, that's the most popular thing. That's the flag.
That's how you know the goat is right way up.
Little witchy friend. We soon meet the other young people who live at the house. They're all awful, but in different ways. We've got Dutch, played by Brian Burnett. We've got Larry, played by Brett Erickson. And Dahlia, played by Eliza Swenson, who I would argue is one of the better actors of this piece.
By far.
Yeah. She's also in a couple of other things that I'll talk about later that I didn't mind. Dahlia goes through... This is how you can tell that it was not a young person who wrote this script. Because Dahlia, when she's going through Michelle's stuff, she holds up her CDs and she calls them jamskis.
What do you call them?
I call them Tunes Ahoy.
I can't move in my house for jam skis.
It sounds like something that a greaser teen would call like a hit single.
Oh, hey, what have you got in your big box of pop circles?
Do you have any melody discs?
Let's go get a cherry phosphate and have a bop.
Hey, Jimmy, put on some jam skis. We'll go racing at Thunder Road. But thankfully that's the only piece of youthful slang that is attempted to be crowbarred into this film. Thankfully,
are you forgetting medical Mary Jane?
Oh, I am forgetting medical Mary Jane. Yeah, we we also meet Jackie, who's Bisson's awful fucking wife. She's played by Diana Yala Goldner, very religious and awful woman who seems to think that Michelle wants to fuck Mr. Bisson. No, nobody does. No, you don't.
And also, Mr. No. She's very sleepy. She's very sleepy all the time.
The first thing she says when she walks into the room is that she calls the two girls whores of Babylon, and steals the camisole. And so there's a flashback where Michelle's dad appears to her, and he opens his shirt and says, "I suppose you never saw these before." And his chest is covered in what looks like black chicken drumsticks.
Plastic chicken drumsticks, though.
Apparently they're supposed to be leeches. I'll post a photo on the socials of what this looks like. They do look like drumsticks.
We should note as well that whenever her dad appears, he is eyeless.
Mm-hmm.
And there's little bits, whenever Michelle has a dream or a flashback, there's another extra little bit, a little clue into who she might have been before the accident. So there's eyeless dad, and then the leeches, and then there'll be, at one point, there's a naked woman on his arm.
Yeah, I think that's supposed to be his girlfriend that Michelle apparently attacked.
Actually, any real cults that use leeches, I'm just going to say.
Maybe they should. I mean,
maybe
I would.
They should. That's the only thing missing.
They're like tiny vampires. Why wouldn't you use them in your I don't know, sorcery or whatever it is? Seems like fun.
Yeah, they can't, it's all just bloody quaaludes and sex. No leeches yet.
I'm going to get a pet leech. Anyway.
Do it. Oh, can I name it?
Yeah, go on.
Archie.
Oh, I was going to call him Cloris Leachman, but that's better.
Oh, nice.
The kids are all in group therapy with Bisson. I don't imagine he's a licensed psychologist, and he doesn't act like one in this scene, certainly not. Larry seems to have taken a shine to Michelle. Michelle reads out her diary to him, showing, she's trying to show him that she's this evil, witchy person and that she just wanted to punish her father, but he's still, into her.
Yeah.
He's like, "No, you seem okay."
Yeah. You're cute. I mean, you've got a dark side, but you're cute. And he's so naive. He thinks the Satanic Journal might be maybe a creative writing project.
Larry explains that Jackie is basically running a grift with the house and that she sells the belongings of the kids they take in. She gets them prescribed meds and then on-sells them. That's where the medical Mary Jane comes in. He's surprisingly okay with all this. He's just kind of accepted that he lives in this house of horror.
And that there's not just normal locks on the doors, there's chains and padlocks.
The next scene is very indicative of the pacing of this film, because there's a scene where Bisson is watching a horror movie.
Oh, God.
He's sitting there watching this horror movie, and I don't know what horror movie it is. It just looks like some, indie low-budget thing. It might have even been one of the director's other films. I have no idea. He's watching it. He's enjoying it. He's smoking some weed. He's having a laugh as the people are getting murdered. But this scene goes for so fucking long.
So long.
Oh my God.
Also, it's very unfair at this point to be shown footage of someone enjoying a horror movie.
This could be us, but you play in.
Yeah, that's right.
I understand what the scene was trying to do, because the character is shown laughing at people being murdered in a horror movie. So we're meant to be like,
you're bad.
We're like, okay, we get it. He's a jerk. But it is mind-boggling how long they stay on this guy. It cuts back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, from Bisson laughing to the movie to him laughing to him lighting his pipe. It is ridiculous how long this scene is, and it was so fucking tedious. So after that exhausting fucking scene. Dahlia convinces Michelle to use the board to contact her father. Michelle summons this sort of seance scene around her. You know, they're in a black room with candles, and they've gone into this whole other universe, it seems. There's someone in a hood, and she says she's making a deal.
I thought this bit was legitimately, it had some creepiness to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time Michelle convinced me that she was interesting.
I did notice that in this scene, it was one of the first times I saw her emote very much.
Yeah.
Which was very reassuring to know that she could do that. Michelle also calls her dad father all the time, which I thought was very strange.
Yeah, she should call him sir.
No, man, you don't call your dad father, do you?
If it was well written, I would say maybe that's because she doesn't remember him as her father. She has trouble remembering. So maybe it's a way of implying that she's kind of formal and distant if it was a better written movie, but it's not, so it's just weird.
Do Americans not say dad? Because I feel like every horror movie I see, it's always either father or the other extreme, which is daddy.
I'm gonna say that they do, because there's literally a show called American Dad.
That's a cartoon.
That's the only
That's not
evidence
based in reality. And also because they weren't going to call it American Daddy.
No,
that's a different show. There's a different show. It's a show I make in my head. So a mysterious figure slits Dahlia's wrists in the night, kills her. This is where we get our next scene with Jeff. He comes back. Evidently, he's also investigating this case. It's seen as a suicide, obviously, because her wrist was slit. But as he starts interviewing Michelle, who does not make a strong case for herself, she just continually says very strange and off-putting things, she becomes very much Joyner's prime suspect.
And he writes things down in his extremely flimsy notebook. There is no technology in this movie.
Do cops use iPads now?
If you're a post-2006 cop listening to this...
Write in. No, don't. I don't care what you have to say.
ACAB.
Yeah, it was so disappointing, like seeing Jeffrey Combs being given so little to do. I mean, he doesn't even come back after this scene, spoiler.
No.
Even though he's meant to be investigating this case, he doesn't return. He doesn't get to do any further police work, doesn't get to wrap up the case in any meaningful way. And as I said, he's doing the best he can with this script. But in the next scene, I noticed there was a lovely Tiffany LED light lamp. And that was the only thing I noticed, because I kept finding myself so easily distracted by everything in the script.
And now we're about 8 incongruous conversations in, I think.
Michelle does try to leave Harmony House, but she's attacked outside the house. And then we get a whole bunch of deaths all in a row. So in between a bunch of Michelle's flashbacks and hallucinations, Larry goes to see the doctor that worked on Michelle. And the doctor tells Larry that they built Michelle's face from scratch based on family photos. This is some world-class facial technology, if that's true in the film. Like, it almost looks like she never had surgery at all.
Well, she didn't look like she had surgery in the family photos, so they just copied that.
Some guy's holding Michelle hostage. He seems to believe that Michelle killed a woman that he knew. There's, again, another whole scene of her saying, I didn't do it. I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, I know you did it. I know you did. There's like 4 different scenes where that happens. Michelle does find Bisson dead, watching porn. Murdered, obviously, not like wanked to death. I do not believe he died from the pornography itself.
Michelle's thought process is, everyone's dead. Time for a shower.
Yes, and that is where some more of our gratuitous titties come in, and gratuitous butt. No real reason for her to have a shower. Certainly no real reason for her to be entirely naked in this scene. It is just an excuse to get this actress naked. And the actress that plays Dahlia gets her tits out earlier as well.
This is 80s comedy movie levels of tits. Again, I think that's another thing that reminded me of earlier movies where it's just like, oh, we haven't shown anyone's tits yet. Let's get on it.
And I don't think that people care about tits in movies, in horror movies especially, the way they used to, because we have internet pornography.
Yeah.
If anything, there are too many ways to see titties now than there were compared to the 80s. So it's why they don't make like erotic thrillers anymore, because
Yeah.
you don't need to go to a movie to see tits anymore. You can see them literally anywhere.
It's why SBS has lost its shine.
Oh, the hours I spent waiting for the ratings warning on SBS to give me something good. It's like, oh, it's only rated M. I don't care.
Yeah, turning on SBS before Netflix. Come on, what do you got for me? What do you got?
Watching a whole movie for the for the barest of chances of something titillating. Yeah, I don't think I can definitely see why 80s horror did that. And again, it was still gratuitous then, obviously, but I can see the reasoning behind it. And they felt like, I don't know, maybe they felt like most people who saw horror movies were men or young boys. So they're like, we're going to put titties in this, otherwise people won't watch it. But nowadays,
there's so many other reasons not to watch it. I mean,
yeah, I mean, nowadays I feel like the horror genre is so much more populated with women that you can't really make that assumption.
But the double singlet that Michelle wears in this is, you can see that across the horror genre on cheeks.
The double layers, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, Jennifer Love Hewitt is in a double-layered singlet in nearly every horror she's in.
Well, I guess one of them might be like shapewear and the other is a normal singlet.
Yeah. Really starting to recognise how garment-focused I am when I'm watching horror movies.
Yeah, you're definitely picking up stuff that I didn't.
How unexpectedly sartorial of me.
So there's also another good Tiffany lamp in the scene where Michelle finds Bisson dead. Again, easily distracted. I think that's what
garments you do, Tiffany lamps.
Yeah, I love lighting. She also finds Dutch dead, who seems to think that she did it. We also see Jackie dead, which is fine.
Yeah, she finally gets the sleep she so clearly needed.
Did you think that she was tired in this movie? Because I thought she was drunk.
Well, it was either she was drunk or stoned or had just woken up in every single scene.
Yeah, so there was definitely a scene where she's talking to Larry, where he confronts her about how she has all their stuff locked up. And she definitely seemed drunk there. And I'm like, oh, is she meant to be drunk and then we're not supposed to like her because she's a drunk?
Or is the actress drunk because she realizes that she's in this film?
Yeah, again, I'm sure there's reasons for that choice. Larry keeps trying to call the house to talk to Michelle, and
on the landline, the push button landline.
Again, there's some very strange choices in pacing and editing. So in the scene, we see Michelle. She's sitting in the house crying about all the killings. Then we cut to the doctor, who's with Larry, and the doctor says, "Try again. Maybe you dialed wrong." And then we cut back to Michelle crying. There was no need for that. We already know it's him calling the phone. He could have just called again. There was no need for that scene.
Well, they just thought we've done all this set dressing of putting a touch-tone landline telephone on top of a filing cabinet in the hallway. We can't just waste it.
Chekhov's phone. Larry finds Michelle in the house, or what he believes to be Michelle in the house. But she's wearing makeup now, so that's how we know she's evil.
And it's not fresh out of bandages lip gloss, neither.
No, it's very heavy and very deliberate, not natural makeup. And he gives us this explanation of what's happening.
There's been a huge mix-up. They got it all wrong. The dental charts don't match. The house, the journal, the board. It's got nothing to do with you. The guy in the car, not your dad. They rebuilt your face from the wrong photos. Don't you get it? The girl, the one that wrote the journal, that's not you. That's... Do you understand what I'm saying?
No further questions.
And who saw anything coming, really?
I was blindsided by this film. It Shyamalaned me. But then, unfortunately, Michelle kills Larry. But then Michelle comes around the corner. She's just gotten out of the shower. And Michelle says, "Hey, Kayla, looking good." Dear God, movie. What have you done? The character that we knew as Michelle is actually Kayla and will henceforth be known as such. If that's confusing, yes.
Can we call the real Michelle Evil Michelle?
Only if you say it like that every time.
Oh, okay, then let's not.
Michelle needs Kayla And this is where I started to lose a bit of the thread of it. Michelle needs Kayla to summon the demons and tell the demons that she isn't Michelle, because demons apparently aren't very good with faces, and they've been haunting entirely the wrong girl.
Evil Michelle thought that Kayla had found a way to cheat death because the poison she'd given her in a flashback didn't take an effect because Kayla basically just spat it out.
Mm.
She thought she had the gift of eternal life given to her by the demons that was rightfully hers after all these sacrifices.
Yeah, she put in all the work.
And all those leeches, which somehow had something to do with it.
Yeah, so there's a lot of flashbacks throughout the film, but then we get one big flashback at the end that shows evil Michelle picking up Kayla, who again looks entirely different to the way we now see Michelle. So that facial reconstruction surgery was light years ahead of its time.
Yeah.
And evil Michelle tries to poison Kayla, as you said. They try to summon stuff. Kayla is unconscious, and that's when the car accident happens because evil Michelle's dad drives the three of them to the hospital. Evil Michelle pokes out his eyes, jumps out of the car crashes.
Taylor's oldest time.
It's the oldest trick in the book. Gut someone's eyes out and then just barrel roll out of the car.
Gouge and dive.
We've all done
kiss
it.
And ride.
What follows is a truly terrible fight scene between Michelle and Kayla. It is...
Or, depending on who you are, an incredibly horny fight scene.
It is also horny. There's some very sexual sounds. There's not a lot of actual injury, I don't think. It's very poorly choreographed. I mean, even if you didn't want these characters to actually make contact with each other, there's also no sound effects to indicate that they're punching or making contact with each other's bodies.
There's just the occasional
Yeah, or just like a slight sort of like a slapping sound, like a wet fish hitting a bench. And yeah, Kayla kills Michelle, and that's the end. The glorious end.
Maybe Kayla just went, we don't know that for sure. Maybe Kayla decided, nah, actually being evil is more fun. No, you're right the first time. I'll be quiet.
Yeah, and it really does just end that way where Kayla kills Michelle and fade out.
It feels to me that they were robustly preparing themselves for the sequel that they expected people to want.
Oh yeah, people clamoring, having further questions about the film. We need Satanic 2.
The leeches in return.
Satanic 3, Evil Michelle's Revenge.
Satanic 4, Too Leech, Too Furious.
Satanic 5, Kayla goes to college.
Satanic 6, This Horror's Funny.
Satanic 7, Leprechauns in Space.
Satanic 8, A Christmas Special.
Satanic 9, Hawaiian Style.
Satanic, what are we up to? Wait, Satanic 10. Satanic versus Predator.
Well, you have to go all the way up to 13. Like, that's how you would have to do it. Yeah. Like, you'd have to make either 1 or 13 films. There's no others. Leprechaun 11, Kayla in the City.
You just called it Leprechaun 11.
Oh, no.
That's when they changed. No, we've just ruined the whole franchise.
Oh. Well, I mean, it's only natural that Satanic would team up with the Leprechaun film series. Satanic 13, Jeffrey Combs Returns.
At last.
At last, and then we get a whole backstory of him. Like, the whole movie is like how he became a cop. It has nothing to do with the original concept.
Where he got his oversized jacket from, finally.
Yep. How his wife fucked a Satanist, and then that's why he decided to become a cop. Something I like doing is finding the sort of connections that come back to Jeffrey Combs outside of this film. So Cliff, who played the janitor, was played by Mike Gaglio, who also starred with Jeffrey Combs in American Bandits, Frank and Jesse James as Otis. And as I mentioned, Eliza Swenson, who played Dahlia, she starred in the Penny Dreadful Picture Show with Combs. She was also the composer of that film, as well as composing for and starring in Dorothy and the Witches of Oz with Combs.
Oh, she's not just a pair of tits and a decent actress.
No, I would argue that she's, along with Combs, one of the better actors in this. I mean, obviously she's again doing the best she can with a bad script, but there's a few moments where she's genuinely quite engaging and interesting in a way that the rest of the cast aren't. So that's Satanic, 2006. What a ride.
You said it with a sigh. So that's Satanic.
Oh, look, I just there is and is going to be a lot of films that I watch for this podcast where Combs does not have a huge role in it, and that's fine. Obviously, you know, he does a lot of cameos and stuff in like indie movies, and you know, it's cool that he lends his name to project. But yeah, this script just did nothing for him. Like, he was doing the best he could, and he's a good actor, so he's good at what he's doing in the movie. But everybody has such a flimsy character, including, unfortunately, Mr. Joyner.
I have kind of affectionate thoughts about the movie now that it's done and I've watched it. That's sort of like, oh, isn't that cute? It's so bad. But I was intensely frustrated watching it. It's not so bad, it's good, it's bad.
Yeah. We were talking off pod about the difference between bad and fun and bad and boring. And there's lots of films, especially like a lot of 80s B-movie horror, that is, you know, technically from a filmmaking perspective, it's probably not up to scratch, or, you know, it has problems or it has issues. But it's clear that there's like passion and interest in the film, or they've tried to make it fun and funny. Like, that's all fine. The budget is never the problem. It's the effort put in. And yes, unfortunately with this, there was both a low budget and little effort.
But quite a few.
At least 4 I can think of. If we're talking individual tits.
Then 6, because there's the girlfriend, the fleeting girlfriend on the arm
of Leech Man. Yep, you're right.
Of Leech Man.
6 tits. Good innings for
6
a 90-minute film. Yeah. Yeah, that's a pair of tits every half hour just to keep you awake. You know, when I was writing up my, you know, my notes and stuff, and I was kind of trying to think of things that I could commend this film for. Again, apart from a few funny lines, a couple of good performances, I was really struggling to latch onto anything that was particularly enjoyable about this. And that makes me feel bad because, you know, when you consider how much effort goes into making a film, you know, you never want to quote unquote shit on people's work, but it is
do better.
Yeah, sometimes it is a real struggle to look at something and go, God, this got made. So yeah, even I could have told you that there was problems here, and I'm an idiot.
You've got a film podcast.
Oh yeah. Look at me. I'm basically David and Margaret combined. Funny that was my first go-to. Like,
they're the only go-to. They're the only go-to.
Yeah, like Roger Ebert didn't even come into my head. It was like, no, David and Margaret, they are the pinnacles of film criticism. Yeah, I mean, I used to review films, you know, for a living, and it is really hard because these things are entirely subjective. So it's very hard to look at something and go, was this objectively a bad decision in a film, or did I just not like it? The only time I can ever objectively say that a film was bad and a waste of time and objectively a terrible blight on humanity was when I had to see Grimsby. What's
Grimsby?
I'm so glad you don't know. Like, it means that you haven't seen it and you can live your life not having seen it. Like, I envy you for that. It's a Sacha Baron Cohen film with I think Mark Strong as well. Yeah, it is a nightmare film. I had the same worst film of all time for about 15 years until I saw Grimsby, and then I was like,
what was the previous one?
My Super Ex-Girlfriend.
When I go through the 1001 films you must watch before you die, I do a little 1-paragraph review on Facebook just because I have to do a project. I have to make things into a thing. And I've got a massive amount of respect for Sacha Baron Cohen, but I cannot enjoy much of his work. And and I get why Borat's huge and popular, but my 1-paragraph review was just the word nope. Because I get it. And I understand what he's doing and I understand its appeal, but I can't.
I was trying to think of a good segue to talk about your book, but maybe I'll just really inelegantly just ask you about it because I think it's really interesting.
I wrote a book about cults. It's called Zealot. There we go.
Yeah.
We talked about it.
Yeah, nailed it. Bye.
Yeah.
Were you one of those kids that was always interested in like horror-y stuff, or did that only happen when you were an adult?
Less horror. I mean, I watched horror in the 80s was amazing, but quite tacky. So it was just, and also the birth of VHS and stuff meant horror was a massive part of that. But certainly as a teenager, I had quite an interest in serial killers, and I think it was just a fledgling true crime person. I don't know what drew them to me. I'm a nice white middle class girl who's probably, certainly at the time, was pretty naive. I haven't been able to pin down what the interest is, but I think I like, good or bad, the exhilaration of reading about the awful things that people do. But I also like it when, like, cult leaders are pathetic. It's fun to read about the majority of them who are sort of men who can't get power or sex or money any of the usual ways, so they have to lie and exploit people to get it. And I like watching their comeuppance. But I'm also there's something awful that I love, and I think there's crossover with horror movies about watching bad stuff happen. It doesn't make me a great person, but I can't, like, it's always been that way.
No, I think it's totally understandable. I mean, horror movies and like culty stuff is a bit different because I think with cult leaders and cults in general, I think the joy comes from watching a grift fail.
Yes.
Like that's always fun.
It's proper joy. And I love watching them try to keep lying, and nothing gives me more joy than when they decide to defend themselves in court. I love it. They're so bad at it. Your power doesn't work here, mate.
Yeah, because then, like the lawyer or something has to lay out their bullshit in plain English and just be like, so you were telling people that they could find God by having sex with you. Is that true? It's like, oh, when you say it like that, you make it sound horrible and false.
The biggest gift of the last 4 or 5 years was seeing Keith Raniere and Nexium fall. That was delicious.
The cult thing is so often genuinely just like the schadenfreude of watching awful people usually get their comeuppance.
Yeah, but in any movie, if any movie gets you to go, what? Then I think that's what that thrill is what I seek in the true crime stuff as well. First with killers and now with cults, because cults are more likely to make you go, what? Without anyone actually dying. And I think that's the same thrill I get from any movie at all with a twist, movie or show, but horror is more likely to make, even sometimes just in horror movies, the audacity of the directors or special effects people for doing whatever they've just done. It's that, the what? Love it.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a connection to last week's episode, which was about the film Dark House, where Jeffrey Combs' character in that actually, he plays a guy who runs haunted house attractions, and he has a little speech in that about why people enjoy fear. And I think it's quite accurate, listener. If you haven't listened to that episode, go back. Yeah, it's really just about being able to feel adrenaline and feel exhilarated and feel scared, but in like a safe way, because it's a movie. I've always felt that way too.
We're too smart to be in a cult, so.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. When I bought my last car, I always thought I'd be too smart to be scammed by a secondhand car dealer. Apparently, I'm not.
Yeah.
Because I got scammed hardcore, so I reckon I'd be probably an easy fit to get into a cult now. That's something I've had to realize about myself.
Well, I'll send you some options.
Yeah, can you send me some pamphlets?
Absolutely.
That might help me. I've got quite low self-esteem at the moment, so if you could find something that you think would help.
If you have low self-esteem at the moment, then this is your time.
Yep. I'm looking for meaning. I've got a bit of cash lying around. What can you make happen?
Well, I realized recently that because I love my food and I'm a wanker for a degustation menu if I can. And I realized that that's me just going, oh shit, That's me wanting to give someone my money and for them to make all my decisions for me for the next hour. And then I just went, that's exactly what cult leaders do.
Okay, so degustation is a cult. All right, I got
Yep. I'm in the cult of degustation.
it.
I've got high cholesterol, but I worship every day.
I wake up and I pray at the altar of my braised artichokes.
Oh, foie gras.
Oh, Lord of tapas. Is tapas like degustation? I don't know because I'm not very middle class.
Oh, Satanic 14. Tapas.
Well, thank you for talking to me about Satanic Joe. I'm sorry.
You're sort
And-
of forgiven because it was a delight to talk to you about it.
And it's always fun to see Jeffrey Combs, obviously, even fleetingly. Love a bit of Combs, obviously.
Oh, JC.
Well, apart from your wonderful book, anything to plug?
It's quite easy. It's Jo Thornely, but it's ELY. Every single person gets that wrong.
As usual, you can follow Re-AniMates Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and Re-AniMates Podcast on Tumblr. And as usual, the episodes will be up on YouTube not long after. But, you know, get in touch, say hi. I'm very lonely.